Hello, YouTube. I am back here to do another video, and I am actually in my house this time. I'm not sitting in my car, which is nice. I am off today, and my kids are at school, so it is very nice that I can sit in my home and do this video. I actually hope that it loads better. I actually wanted to come on here today and talk about the message or the story of King David. And I know that in my last video I said I was going to do either a prayer or how to hear God, and I still plan on doing those, but God had other plans. He actually prompted me a couple of times to do this message, and I think it's really important to hear this message, especially for Christians. And I know that when I read this story, I actually sobbed, and I will read through the story, and you'll understand why as I read on, because a lot of people know, or a lot of Christians, most Christians at least, I think, at least I knew the story of David and Bathsheba and how he sinned against God by taking her as his wife, and that basically the story is, if you don't know, King David had multiple wives, and then he was lusting towards this one lady named Bathsheba, and she was married. And so King David had her husband, Uriah, sent off into his army to fight for him so that he would actually die at the hands of his enemy. And where I'm going to pick up the story is Uriah did die, and then King David went and made Bathsheba his wife, and he did sleep with her before, and she obviously slept with the king before Uriah was killed in battle. And so Nathan was a prophet back then, and he actually comes and he rebukes David. So it starts in, if you want to read the whole entire story, King David's story actually is in 2 Samuel. And I would encourage you to go back and to read it. And but the part that I'm reading is 2 Samuel 12:1. And I'm actually going to, I'll just read it. I was thinking about skipping through it just because there's a lot of content here, and this video might be a little long, so I apologize because I like short videos. So anyway, here we go. The Lord sent Nathan to David, and when he came to him, he said, "There were two men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb he had bought. He raised it and grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, drank from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one who had come to him. David burned with anger against the man and said to Nathan, As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over because he did such a thing and had no pity." Then Nathan said to David, "You are the man. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave you master's house to you, and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you all Israel and Judah. But if all this had been too little, I would have given you even more. Why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and took his wife to be your own. You killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now therefore the sword will never depart from your house, because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own." This is what the Lord says, "Out of your own household I am going to bring calamity on you. Before your eyes I will take your wives and give them to one who is close to you, and he will sleep with your wives in broad daylight. You did it in secret, but I will do this thing in broad daylight before all Israel." Then David said to Nathan, "I have sinned against the Lord." So David knew, he figured it out pretty quick that he was in the wrong. And he did ask for forgiveness from the Lord. Then Nathan replied, this is where I lost it a little bit. "The Lord has taken away your sin." And we love that. The Lord has taken away the sin. "You're not going to die. But because by doing this you have shown utter contempt for the Lord, the son you born to you, to him and Bathsheba, will die." Did you catch that? The son that was born to you will die. It's hard, isn't it? It's really hard to read that. When I read that, I was a bit shocked that the Lord would do something like that. I'll keep going though. "After Nathan had gone home, the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife had borne to David, and he became ill. David pleaded with God for the child. He fasted and spent nights lying in sackcloth on the ground. The elders of his house stood beside him to get him up from the ground, but he refused, and he did not eat any food with them." I'm going to stop there just for a second. There's so much more in this that is good. And, you always wonder sometimes why certain things happen. And I'm not saying, I don't want to come on here and I don't want anybody to think anyone who has lost a child or a loved one has died, that God comes in and just punishes you for something. I don't believe that our God works that way. I do think he is a loving God, and but I also know that he's a just God, and he does punish his children when we disobey, or especially when we know better, when we know that we shouldn't be doing things, when we know that we are out of his will, when we know we are disobeying against the Lord. And I struggle with this because King David was the apple of God's eye. God loved David. He loved David so much. And he was very close to David, and he gave him so much. He gave him a kingdom. He gave him everything he ever wanted. And that's why he even said in above, he's like, "If you would have asked for more, I would have given you more. But instead, you have sinned against me." And so it's so hard because instead of taking David's life, he took his son's life. And it's not his firstborn. He had other children. This is the firstborn with Bathsheba. I want to make that very clear. But again, if you've ever lost a loved one, I'm not telling you that God took your loved one away from you because you have sinned. Sometimes we are put through trials, and we might not understand the trials that we're put in, why we're enduring it. And is he there with you every step of the way? Absolutely. Was he still there with David when he mourned and when he was having a hard time with this situation? Absolutely. But I want you to understand something. There's more to the story. It doesn't end here. And it gets better. It really does. And not that David didn't not love or he didn't want the child to ever be replaced. You can never replace a person. You can never replace anybody that you lose. But God still blesses those who repent, who turn away. And he's like, yeah, I love you and I want you to turn away, but I also need to teach you a lesson. And I will actually share part of my testimony of the time that God had reprimanded me and how I am still have a constant reminder of my disobedience to the Lord. But let me continue on with the story because there's some other important pieces that I want you to hear. On the seventh day, the child died. David's attendants were afraid to tell him that the child was dead, for they thought. There we go. I'll keep going. It is still recording. I couldn't see anything. David noticed that his attendants were whispering among themselves, and he realized the child was dead. "Is the child dead?" he asked. "Yes," they replied. "He is dead." Then David got up from the ground. After he had washed, put on lotions, and changed his clothes, this is really important, he went into the house of the Lord and worshipped him. I'm going to repeat that. He went into the house of the Lord and he worshipped him. Then he sent to his own house, and at his request they served him food and he ate. His attendants asked him, "Why are you acting this way? While the child was alive, you fasted and wept. But now the child is dead. You get up and eat?" He answered, "While the child was still alive, I fasted and wept. I thought, who knows, the Lord may be gracious to me and let the child live. But now that he is dead, why should I go on fasting? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, but he will not return to me." I'm going to stop there. I would actually encourage you to continue to read on. So I think God is always looking for people who do that, like even in the midst of their pain and of their suffering, that He's still number one in their lives, and that there's actually a couple of different stories in the Bible that talk about people who've gone through hardships, people who've lost everything. If you read through the entire book of Job, Job lost everything. He didn't lose just one child. He lost his entire family, his wife, all of his kids, all of his possessions, and yet he still worshiped God in the midst of everything. And I know that for this particular passage, it's very clear that this was a punishment from God for David's sins. But I want you to understand something really, really important, is that if you continue to read David's story, what you find out is he was actually born a second son from Bathsheba, and she bore him Solomon. And Solomon was loved by God. God really loved Solomon. Solomon became the next heir, his king, or he became king, excuse me, and he was the wisest king. And there's a whole bunch of stories about King Solomon. And King Solomon was the one who wrote mostly of Proverbs, the books of Proverbs. And so I just think there's some beauty in there. Even though when David was in the midst, when he was still in pain and he was still laboring in that pain, and even though the Lord let it happen and even caused it to happen in this particular case, he still loved David. And he still honored him, and he honored his family line with another child. And that child was the heir and became the heir. And he actually reigned over Israel for a very long time. And he was very prosperous, and he was a very wise king. And so I want to read actually a couple of commentaries that I think are very good because, it kind of answers some of those why questions. And I love my Bible. It's a study Bible, and it always has little commentaries, and I just think that they're very, very good. But one of the things that says, David confessed and repented his sins, but God's judgment, you hear that? His judgment was that the child would die. The consequences of David's sins were irreversible. Sometimes an apology isn't enough. When God forgave us and restores our relationship with Him, He doesn't eliminate all the consequences of our wrongdoings, which is absolutely true. We may be tempted to say, "This is wrong. I can always apologize to God," but we must remember that we may set into motion events with irreversible consequences. And isn't there is so much truth to that. I don't think I need to go elaborate on that one. The second one that I want to read to you, there's actually another commentary referencing 2 Samuel 12:14. Why did this child have to die? This was not a judgment on the child for being conceived out of wedlock, but a judgment on David for his sin. David and Bathsheba deserved to die, but God spared their lives and took the child instead. God had work for David to do in building the kingdom. The child's death was a horrible punishment for David and Bathsheba to bear. I would agree with that. It was also possible that the child lived. If the child had lived, God's name would have been dishonored among the Israel's pagan neighbors. What would they have thought of God, who rewards murder and adultery by giving a king a new heir? So I just want you to understand that sometimes when God decides to do things, it's not just because he's being mean and he's being a big bully and he's there to destroy your life. God knows what we need. He knows everything about you. You were designed by him. He created you. He knows where your heart's at. He knows what you need and what you don't need and what's bad for you and what's good for you. So I think it's always a fair question when you're going through something hard to ask Jesus why. Why, God? He doesn't always answer in the time. But you know what, though? That doesn't mean he never answers. Sometimes the answer comes much later, years even later, because then when you look back and you reflect, you can see God's hand working and you can see the answer right before your eyes. So I just want to encourage you, if you are going through something tough and going through something hard, know that God's own people that he loved King David, went through hardship too. I now will actually give you and just to let you know, God punishes those he loves. He really does. It's no different than us punishing our kids. When we see our kids running out of line, or we know they are definitely out of line, we punish them. We don't like it. No parent likes to punish their kids, but we know that they have to understand there are consequences to their actions. And any parent who's out there, you would agree with me. I mean, who would let their kid run around in the house with a knife? Never. I'm being a little sarcastic there. I don't know too many children who do that. And if you are one of those parents, I'm praying for you. But sorry, I'm kind of joking. But joking aside, there are reasons, or God does punish those who he loves. And my quick story is back when I was in college, and I was definitely not right with the Lord. I was doing my own thing. And the interesting thing is, though, I went to school to be a dental hygienist. I had my heart set on that. Ask any of my family members. You can ask my parents. That is what all about me, wanted to be. Had my heart set on it. And it's interesting because during that time frame, I do remember asking God and asking him if this was really the path that he had chosen for me. And guess what? He told me. He told me, no, this is not the direction that I want you to go. And guess what? It's what I wanted. So that's what I kept doing. And it's interesting because when I look back, I hated dental hygiene school. I hated every part of it. It was horrible. It was one of the worst experiences of my life. And guess what I got to come out of it? Debt. Tons and tons of student debt. And I'm not saying that student debt is all bad. Lots of us who go to college for a certain degree or something, we end up with student debt. I mean, that's just the reality of it. But I had so much student debt when I was done. You know, I had it stuck in my head. I'm gonna be a dental hygienist. I'm gonna get a really good job. I'm gonna have this paid off in 5 years. Well, that didn't happen. I could not find any work as a dental hygienist. I could barely find sub work as a dental hygienist. And I will share with you how much I walked out of school with. I think I had 40. I'm guessing. I'd have to look. Don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure, all said and done, when I actually sat down and looked at the numbers, this might be a little high because I think this may have included some other incurred debt at the time. And by the way, this is like 10 years ago. I have since then, I have went back to school. I got a second degree and love my job that I currently do. But anyway, I think it was about $40,000 in debt. It's a lot. It's a lot to come out of school with. And I remember praying and praying and praying for a job, for work, and he did not answer that prayer. And he knew that it wasn't good for me, that this wasn't where he wanted me to be. And I looked for 2 years for a job in dental hygiene, and I applied everywhere and anywhere you could possibly think of, and nobody would hire me. And so, what I'm trying to say is that when you are going against God's will, when you're not in line with His will and He loves you, and you know that you are a child of God, He is not going to let it happen, especially when He knows that it's bad for you. And since then, like I said, I did go back to college, and this time with the Lord's blessing. And He has me right where He wants me. I am where I'm supposed to be, and I know that. I know that I love my job. I love what I do. I work in the financial industry. I'm an executive assistant for a financial advisor, and I wouldn't want it any other way. I love what I do. I love my clients, and it's interesting because God put me there, and it's not what I wanted. And just to give you a little insight about my relationship with God is we kind of have this thing where we fight a lot, and I'm always wrong. He's always right, and it's just kind of funny because he will guide me somewhere or he'll tell me to do something, and I'm like, no, I don't really want to do that. That's not really what I want to do. And he's like, please trust me. You're going to like it. You're going to enjoy it. And it's not only going to advance my kingdom, but it is going to advance our relationship, and it's going to advance you and I together. And so, he's not a bully, and he doesn't bully me into doing these things, by the way. But he won't bless something that he's told you no. He will not bless something that he's like, no, I don't want you to do this. And where I'm telling you, I forgot to mention because I got into the story of everything, where God has punished me, He will not take away my debt. I have seen people pray for checks and pray for stuff and pray for their finances, and He provides. I've seen it happen. I've seen people do it. And there have been so many times where I'm like, well, Lord, I know you can do it for this person. Why won't you do it for me? And because first of all, He wants me to do it on my own. He said, look, I didn't want this for you. This was your choice. You would have been out of debt if you would have just listened to me to begin with. And it's funny because all of my other school debt from the second time I went back to college has been done and paid for years. But I still have one loan hanging over my head, as I call it. But it is a nice reminder from my Lord saying, please abide in me. Listen to me. I know what is good for you, and I love you. And maybe that's what you need to hear today, because He loves you. He's not doing it to hurt you. He's not answering your prayers because He hates you and He wants you to continue to feel pain or suffering or any of that thing. He does it because He loves you. We punish our children because we love them, not because we want to see them be in suffer or pain. And so I just hope this encourages somebody. I did not want to do this message today. I'm not going to lie. This was not on my radar. And it's still hard to read 2 Samuel chapter 12. It's hard. It breaks my heart, especially, when somebody who has children. That's a hard one. And thank the Lord that I just have to deal with a little bit of debt that I'm still paying off after all these years, and I didn't have to lose a child. But also remember that when the Lord puts somebody in high positioning and someone who's over His people, they also have a bigger responsibility. And so not only was He supposed to be an example to the Israelites and to His people, he was the model. And so God does punish, or more severe punishments, for those who are in a bigger authority. My computer slept again. It doesn't really warn you, it just kind of falls asleep. So please excuse me. Thank you for being patient. So anyway, I hope that this message encourages you. I hope that it moves your heart. I'm sorry that it's long. I actually hate long videos. I try to keep them very short. But you know what, though? Maybe this is just what somebody needs to hear. And I'm just going to trust in the Lord that if it's you, pray. Just pray. Ask to hear his voice. Specifically his voice, and that no other voice can speak to you but the Lord's, because there are a lot of other voices out there who want to talk to you. So I do plan on doing a video on that. So until then, God bless. I hope he blesses you. I hope he shines his face upon you. I hope he gives you grace and peace and comfort and love. He is a loving God.